So in this video, we're going to do some Nernst equation calculations for various electrochemistry problems. And these are occurring in aqueous solution. So we'll start by applying some of the terms and techniques that we've learned in other videos. And first, we're going to consider this reaction between copper-2 and tin-2, both of which are aqueous ions. Copper is a product, and tin-4 is the other product, an aqueous solution. So just like any other electrochemistry problem, we're going to start by first assigning oxidation states so that we can identify the identity of the oxidant and reductant and identify the half reactions that are occurring. So copper starts as a 2+ cation, and it's turning into copper solid, which is 0 in oxidation state, and therefore it's going down in oxidation state or becoming more negative. In other words, copper is undergoing reduction, and therefore this is the cathode half reaction. On the other hand, tin-2 originates as +2 and is oxidized or increases oxidation state to become +4, and that oxidation, of course, occurs at the anode.